Hi everyone! Welcome to the analysis of the BC Lab merger using the Bridges model by Harry Acosta, Bevonie Beckford, and Shelini Rupwate. Thank you so much for choosing our poster and our presentation to review. I'm Shelini and I will take you through the summary of the BC Lab merger. So this is going to be an amalgamation of two labs in British Columbia. They are LifeLabs and B.C. Biomedical Laboratory. Both of these companies are great. Together, they perform 90% of outpatient lab work. So essentially, LifeLabs will buy out the BC Biomedical Lab. And these two companies have very different reputations. BC Biomedical Lab is a 50-year-old private company owned by medical doctors. There are 45 labs in BC, and they serve 6,000 to 8,000 patients, and they perform 32,000 tests. BC Biomedical Labs is known to be the best employer in Canada. LifeLabs is a national company. They have 80 labs in BC, serving 11,000 patients and performing 44,000 tests. They are known for their vision of future lab advancement. So both of these companies that join together, they have awesome qualities and strengths, and their goal is to serve British Columbians. Specifically on their goals, they want to be more reliable, effective, and efficient. They'd like to reduce competition and costs, however, not to close other locations of labs. Also, they want to meet the increase in demand for lab work, especially for those specialty tests. BC Medical Association has put in lab reforms to save at least 25 million from their 600 million that they are spending. And they do believe that this is achievable through improved technology. So I'm a technologist in the histology lab. And I know, speaking from experience, technology is a very exciting thing that comes through the door. And I get super excited to start to learn the machine, start pushing buttons. So I know a lot of people would relate to that. But at the same time, we do need to be aware of how it will change the workflow. Also, how will people get trained? What are the logistics of how things will be running in the lab? These are things that we need to be aware about. But specifically to this lab merger, technology alone will not meet the goals laid out in the transition to a merger. As we've learned in this course, success of a transition will largely depend on the quality of leadership. It is so important. So thank you for everyone who read our abstract. I'm just going to read it over quickly and jump right into our presentation. This paper examines a strategic merger by the stakeholders of two labs in British Columbia, Canada. We discuss the change, the new transition, and the transition process, the psychological process. We will discuss the three phases of transition and how they will apply to the merger. These phases are the ending phase, the neutral zone, and the new beginnings. We recommend that managers emphasize the vision of the change, the standardization of lab processes, and that managers provide meaningful team building exercises. To aid this change, we focus on what Bridges calls the transition management process. Transition management begins with understanding how change impacts employees and the dynamics of the transition. We recommend that the vision of the merger be summarized into small examples and that management avoid assumptions by clearly communicating the change. Also, management must plan a process of implementation and create a transition monitoring system to assess and track the impact of the process on the employees. We examine 4 psychological principles that apply to the merger. We discuss how workers are given a purpose, how to reinforce them in their new roles, how to teach new skills that will be required, and the importance of providing consistent role models. We apply 4 organization frames by Bowman and Deal, discussing possible changes in the structural frame, the human resource frame, the political frame, and the symbolic frame, and identify essential strategies from each to ensure a successful transition to the merger. So now I'd like to pass this on to Harry. He will talk about the initial ideas from Bridges' model of the organizational transition and how they will apply to the BC Lab merger.
Change versus transition. According to William Bridges, change happens when something starts or stops, or when something that used to happen in one way starts happening in another. It happens at a particular time or in several stages at different times. Transition is a 3-part psychological process that extends over a long period of time and cannot be planned or managed by the same rational formula that work with change. Transitions, the ending phase. This is where people experience feelings of loss. With the LifeLabs and B.C. merger, workers may feel lost in their identity as their company became one. This feeling of loss created an atmosphere of fear and insecurity. The looming reality became the biggest challenge to accept. The neutral zone. This is where employees are suspended between the old and the new way. Progress is slow and difficult, but people are beginning to recognize the need for change and are now willing to try new ways. The new beginnings. Employees started to adjust to the new system. They have accepted that this will be the new norm. Change has been implemented and is now considered legitimate. Applications and recommendations to the BC Lab merger. Change agents must emphasize the vision and importance of change. They need to accept what they've lost and highlight what they will gain in the near future. Standardization of lab protocols and processes must be implemented immediately to ensure the continuity of laboratory quality management. Management must provide staff meaningful exercises to help them integrate successfully into the new environment and role. Team building can be instrumental in creating new relationships.
Hello everyone, my name is Bevonie and I'll be talking about the transition management process. Transition management is the process for helping people through the 3 psychological phases of transition. It involves getting ready for endings and losses, having resources ready for the neutral zone, and celebrating those new beginnings. Organizations that fail to help employees with those endings and losses may find themselves in a change process that is unmanageable. No transition will go exactly as planned. However, there are processes that can be put into place to help with the transition. 1. One of the first steps of transition management is assessing the trustworthiness of leadership and the organization. BC Bio has already taken a step in the wrong direction, leaving LifeLabs now to rebuild the trust. According to William Bridges, leadership in organizations that are not trustworthy will have a hard time with transition. December 2012, rumors about the merger started. January 2013, denial by CEO and President Buchanan of BC Bio. April 2013, merger completed. Trust broken. 2. Identify who will have to let go of what when the change is made. Transition begins with letting go of something, letting go of the old and taking hold of the new. BC Bio is now they are now a part of a larger organization, which will make it essential for that organization, Life Labs to be exact, to identify who will have to let go of what before the change is made. This may be new technology, seeing that LifeLab is technology based, meaning the lab technicians at BC Bio will now need to learn how to do their jobs using new technology. Therefore, they will need to let go of the old way of doing things and take hold of the new way of doing things. 3. Communicate the change by summarizing the big picture into small examples, making sure the employees understand the reason for the change. Communicating the change into smaller examples will allow the employees to connect more and relate more to the change or understand better the reason for the change. But to be exact, the change itself and the reason for the change, to be exact, needs to be communicated first and then the change itself. Because the change was not communicated early on, a lot of the employees already have preconceived notions and a lack of trust. When people have gap in their understanding, they will fill it with what they hear or think, whether it may be true or false. So therefore, it's essential that the communication is made and the communication is made clear, taking pains to make sure that the understanding is there between what is being said and what is being understood. 4. Create a transition monitoring system that evaluates what the processes that were put into place is doing to the organization. BC Bio is a company with emotions tied to it. They have been around for over 50 years, and some of the employees may have generations that have worked for the company. Letting go of that identity may bring resentment, and resentment could spread. Creating a transition monitoring system that evaluates and tracks the processes and see what they're doing to the organization, making sure that the plan is communicated clearly, and making sure that the people and how they're transitioning are not lost in the shuffle. 5. Set up a transition monitoring team. The team will also need to be educated on transition monitoring in order to provide proper feedback and communicate between the organization and the employees in order to have a proper way of communicating what exactly the transition is doing with regards to the neutral zone and how people are managing or getting through. The members of the team can be appointed or they can be selected from inside the organization. Many employees will be feeling a sense of betrayal at this point and resentment. These feelings can lead to hostility towards the organization. Therefore, having someone on the team who can relate to them and who can clearly communicate and articulate what they are feeling would greatly benefit LifeLabs. 6. Management must be educated on transition management models in order to facilitate the transition process. First, management must, however, go through self-transition, and then they should be educated on the transition model and how to facilitate the change process. According to Bridges, for management to facilitate transition, they must first change. They must first affect change in themselves. Studies have also shown that managers who educate themselves on a change process are more likely to succeed than those who do not. Most managers are more concerned with the change process and forget about the employees. However, if the employees of BC Bio are not brought through the neutral zone, then the change in itself will have failed. The managers will need to be reminded that the effectiveness of the change depends on the outcome of the transition, and the transition success involves getting those employees through the neutral zone. Application and recommendations to the BC Lab merger. We recommend that the vision of the merger be summarized into small examples and that management avoid assumptions by clearly communicating first the problem that brought on the change and then the change itself. Also, we recommend management plan a process of implementation and create a transition monitoring team to assess and track the impact of the process on the employees as well as the organization. Recommendations were made based on the observation of the differences of the two labs. BC Biomedical is a people focused organization owned by local doctors, 50 years in business, best employer. LifeLabs, on the other hand, is a technology focused organization known for their vision for the future of lab advancements. Because of these differences, there will be a lot of employees experiencing loss of identity, loss of family culture, security, competency. Monitoring the transition will benefit both the organization and the people who depend on the continued success of that organization. Some examples are CEOs, presidents, managers, regular employees, the residents of British Columbia, government, and stockholders. Bridges 7 R's. Who raised the change? Reason for the change? Return expected. The change was raised by LifeLabs to purchase BC Biomedical Laboratories. The two companies announced that they would be merging. LifeLabs made the announcement regarding the purchase agreement. Reason for the change: increased demands for testing, challenging fiscal environment. This may be due to BC provincial government lab reform, which is looking to cut 25 million from the 600 million currently spent on lab systems. And 3, combining the strength of both companies. Return expected: to become more efficient and effective in providing the residents of BC with reliable access was listed as the return expected from this merger.
Risks involved. Merger may lead to increased lab fees or reduced services for BC residents. Changes to government funding and operational budget deficit. Disruption of service for patients and physicians due to delayed organization of lab protocols and policies. Lack of transparency and cooperation among leadership groups in the merger process. Resources required: government funding, medical associations, employees, physicians, patients, and the general public. Who is responsible? The CEOs of the organizations of LifeLabs and the BC Medical Lab and the government-run BC Medical Association. Lab workers most likely will not have access to those individuals. Therefore, it is important that each worker has access on a daily basis to someone who will take responsibilities for the changes and help to facilitate them. Relationships to other changes. Multiple transitions increase the pressures put on the workers. This is because transition processes are going through multiple changes. The technological advances and upgrades that are stated in the article are being implemented while a merger is happening. There are 2 transitions going on. A lab worker may have to become a key operator of a machine where they have to learn the machine and teach others. The leadership has to be aware of the merger and the training for the new technology and prepared to guide the worker through the multiple transitions.
So there are 4 key psychological principles that support the Bridges model. They are: give workers a purpose, reinforce behavior, teaching skills that are required, and having consistent role models. We're going to go through each of the 4 of those in detail. So starting with giving workers a purpose, this is really looked at in depth by these researchers, Pascarella, Froman, and Cohn. They looked at key ways leaders can increase a sense of purpose in employees, especially during transition. For the first priority is having a satisfied workforce. With mergers, they can actually lead workers feeling lost in the shuffle, having anxious thoughts about how things are supposed to work. But leaders actually must provide employees a way to impact the organization. Each worker has to see their impact by having it measured and rewarded. And social loafing actually decreases when each person's impact is obvious and recognized. Profitability is a second priority. The first, obviously, being the workforce providing a grateful service, but LifeLabs is known for its technical efficiency and bottom line approach. And BC Biomedical Lab is lauded for being a great place to work with socially conscious values. And these two approaches need to be combined in the merger, with profit coming second to meaningful work. Finally, the employee autonomy is also key. While LifeLabs has a system of precise standardization, it is important during the transition to give workers purpose by empowering them to make good decisions independently and flexibly. So the next psychological principle we're going to go over is teach skills required, and we're going to use a method called EDGE. EDGE stands for explain, demonstrate, guide, and enable. The first step is to explain the details of your topic. It is important to communicate the 5 W's: who, what, where, when, why, and how. This is helpful for people to understand the context of the idea. In this stage, the steps are communicated based on how the learner learns best. Leaders should be prepared to communicate effectively in 3 different learning styles: auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. In the second step, leaders demonstrate concrete examples to show how the new skills will work. The leaders will have to communicate in a step-by-step manner what they are doing and perhaps even slow down the process so that everyone will understand. The third step is to guide workers. In this step, the worker will go through the process for the first time, all the while being observed by the leader. Tools and materials are used by the learner for practice, and the learner will do this activity at least twice. However, because practice makes perfect, repetition is essential. And the final step, enable, is when a leader allows the worker to perform independently. This is where workers are measured and encouraged to master their skills. At this step, it is important for leaders to recognize and celebrate the success of the workers. Another way to teach skills that are required is by using a technique called scaffolding. Lab professionals are highly skilled workers, and they come into the field with a wealth of knowledge. So scaffolding is basically building on what the workers already know and help them to learn to integrate new knowledge. It's a very effective tool to teach higher level skills. Just the other day, I was training a student on the special stains bench, and she felt very overwhelmed by the stains she had to do. I don't know if everyone remembers, or the people that work in the lab especially, like timers that go off, it can be super overwhelming. But at the bench, I let her know that the special stains bench is a bit like cooking a turkey dinner. When you have the turkey going in the oven, you have to prepare other side dishes, yet keeping an eye on your turkey. And you want to make sure that you set a time to have things done so that when your guests arrive, you'll be done. So in the same context, we have to get things done so that we can get the patient's result out on time. Once she understood the art of cooking, she took those relatable time management skills and challenged herself to run that bench. She was no longer scared because she took the skills that she already had. She really flourished on that bench. It is not enough to simply give employees a purpose in their new roles within the merger. That is why Bridges emphasizes the importance of reinforcement. The lab workers in BC after the merger are now expected to play new roles and adapt to new norms. This means they'll be asked to perform new behaviors. If these behaviors go unrewarded, they are much less likely to be performed. Skinner and Watson laid the psychological foundations around the proper reinforcement of behavior. Reinforcement is any action taken that increases the likelihood that a desired behavior will be repeated in the future. Therefore, it is critical to reinforce the lab workers in BC for behaviors that are helpful to the merger. There are two types of reinforcement. There's a positive reinforcement, which occurs when something good is given upon performance of a desired behavior. So during the merger, management must pay close attention whenever employees are doing the right thing and give rewards. For example, a worker from LifeLabs may be used to doing some sort of task in a certain way, which was standardized by LifeLabs. But in the newly formed lab, this worker may be asked to collaborate with the workers that are coming from BC Biomedical Lab in new and innovative ways. A good leader will recognize when the LifeLab worker is doing this and reward him or her with verbal praise, educational opportunities, or advancing in the new company. The second type of reinforcement is negative reinforcement and occurs when something bad is taken away upon performance of a desired behavior. For example, a worker from BC Biomedical Lab may have been used to being free to operate in innovative ways, thinking outside the box. In the newly formed lab, this worker may be asked to cooperate with LifeLab workers and to take on some of their highly standardized processes. So when do you actually give out rewards? It's important to implement reinforcement schedules. The first schedule that I'm going to talk about is called Variable Ratio Reinforcement Schedule. So just think of a slot machine in a casino. It does not pay off with every pull of the lever, nor according to a time interval. The payoff is varied, so the gambler does not know when he or she will be rewarded, only that the reward will eventually come if he or she keeps pulling the lever. So going back to the lab merger, lab workers must know that their desirable behavior will be rewarded, but not necessarily every single time. This schedule is highly motivating since the worker knows rewards are coming and that rewards will arrive more quickly if they perform more desirable behaviors. The variable ratio reinforcement schedule also improves intrinsic motivation since the worker is not looking for a reward after a certain number of desirable behaviors are performed. And another schedule is called vicarious reinforcement. Albert Bandura, famous and influential Bobo doll experiment demonstrated that people's desired behaviors are reinforced simply by watching another person be rewarded. So, in a merger setting, a LifeLab worker who is buying in to the new norms of the merged labs can be rewarded in this direct way. Simply seeing a colleague from LifeLabs getting public praise for collaborating with a BC Biomedical Lab tech worker will accomplish this goal. Leaders are well served, therefore, to make at least some of their rewards public so that all employees can see what kinds of behaviors are actually valued and are encouraged to perform those desired behaviors. One thing to cover is that punishment doesn't actually work. Evidence does show that punishment does not work to increase positive behaviors, nor does it decrease negative behaviors in the long run. Punishment tends to increase the likelihood that workers will try to avoid future punishment. As Cohn notes, it is important in today's workplace to give workers intrinsic motivation. If lab workers are punished, they are less likely to develop intrinsic motivation, since they will tend to behave well only when leaders are there to punish them if they don't work. Our next psychological principle is have consistent role models within the organization. Social comparison is a theory that Leon Festinger developed in 1954. It shows that individuals naturally evaluate themselves by comparing themselves with other individuals. They are specifically evaluating their attitudes, abilities, and traits. Social comparison works in two ways, either upward or downward. However, we'll only focus on the upward social comparison as it reflects on having role models within an organization. Festinger explains that upward social comparison occurs when an individual compares themselves to somebody whom they think is better in their attitudes, abilities, or traits. This causes an upward comparison because it makes the individual look at their current state and find ways to improve in order to achieve similar or better results. In essence, the individual is seeing this person as a role model to look up to. So in the merger, there will be workers in some positions that will assume this responsibility in role models such as supervisors. But the lab workers will observe these individuals and will want to better themselves because of their likable traits. Lab workers will observe these individuals and will want to make themselves better because they're seeing likable traits in their role models. Perhaps it's looking up to their leader because they're more efficient by multitasking, yet they remain calm in a chaotic environment. Within the merger, the changes may cause stress, and workers will need leaders to look up to in order to maintain a sense of clarity and calmness. Workers will sense their own anxieties and will work towards being calm in a stressful situation, just as their leaders are doing.
Try not. Do. Or do not. There is no try.
So when Jane gave us our assignment last week, I really felt that Bowman and Deal's organization frame just reinforces and supports the Bridges model so clearly. I'll explain each frame and give an example of how each frame relates to the Bridges model and the BC lab merger. The structural frame is focusing on multi-oriented tasks that focus on how the change will happen. We are looking at the logistics and the time-sensitive deadlines and goals. Roles and responsibilities are clarified as well as policies and procedures. So in the merger, the companies should look at standardization of policy and procedures. Perhaps LifeLabs will use equipment from BC Biomedical Labs, and we'll need to figure out how and when it will be moved to a new facility. Roles and responsibilities may change with workers being responsible for specific tasks, maybe like moving equipment or being a key operator on a new piece of equipment to learn it and to train others. Human resources looks at job satisfaction and growth. This correlates well with reinforcement. If workers are doing a good job and they are recognized by their leaders, they will feel appreciated. Often, this will lead the worker to do even more incredible work because they know they will be rewarded for it. In the merger, let's say if the BC Biomedical Lab workers are used to thinking outside of the box, and LifeLabs workers have a standardized way of thinking. But we'd like to encourage the LifeLab workers to feel empowered to also think outside of the box. Workers that think this way may be rewarded with verbal praises, advancement in their careers, or even just courses to take. Political frame addresses the problems within a group. This is where conflict resolution and coalition building happens. Just to give an example of how goals are achieved, there's a famous experiment called the Robber's Cave, and it shows that there should be a superordinate goal between two groups that have conflict. So basically, there were two groups of kids that were in conflict with each other, and they were told that there was a truck that was stuck in a ditch with all of their supplies inside. So basically, those two group of kids had to come together and work towards getting the truck out of the ditch and moving again. This was the ultimate and common goal of both groups. Therefore, if we have a merger with two labs, the main common goal is having patient quality care and trying to streamline processes that are efficient, effective, and perhaps cost saving. Symbolism is one of the frames that focuses on workers having a sense of purpose. Workers should feel inspired to work in the organization and work towards the company's vision. In the merger, perhaps a new logo would be made on their lab coats to represent the change in the company. Also, within the merger, the leaders should be able to have some form of rituals like huddles to discuss important matters for the day, or ceremonies like celebrations to recognize a worker's achievements or advancement in the company, or even throw a retirement party to recognize workers that have been there for years. All of these will contribute to a sense of belonging to a company and lead workers feeling a sense of pride to coming to work. So coming full circle, back to the Bridges model, how does Bowman and Deal's organizational frames relate to that, with including the BC Lab merger? In the ending zone, workers may feel sad or fearful. Therefore, leaders should focus on the symbolic and political frame. Leaders in the merger must articulate the company's vision, and so they know their purpose within the company. Also, addressing problems in the stage between groups is important for their voices to be heard. In the neutral zone, workers may feel confused and skeptical. Therefore, structural and political frames would be considered to be the focus frames. Their main focus is to get workers to understand the tasks and, including that superordinate goal, to have workers come together. The new beginning should have the workers feel committed and energized to come to work. This is where leaders would take on the HR frame and the symbolic frame. In the merger, workers at this point should feel empowered and have a sense of belonging within the organization. So certainly, using these organizational frames, they can be very handy using them in the different phases of the Bridges model. And leaders should be able to recognize when workers are feeling a certain way, and they are able to adjust and adapt to how the workers need to be led. And that is truly what leadership is all about. Recommendations and applications to the BC Lab merger. So just to recap, we do highly recommend that the BC Lab merger will use the Bridges model in order to achieve great success. There are so many stakeholders involved. That includes BC Biomedical Lab, LifeLabs, CEO, managers, employees, government, BC Medical Lab Association, patients, and the greater public that depend on the success of the organization. Even though these two companies have already great strengths, the employees will naturally go through transitions, which are the ending phase, neutral zone, and new beginnings. Each step has its challenges. Therefore, these are the recommendations that are suggested for the merger. During the ending phase, change agents must emphasize the vision and importance of change. There must be transition monitoring the team to assess the impact of the process on stakeholders, mainly the employees. The managers should hold meetings to show the big picture and communicate the changes. During this phase, managers should give a meaningful purpose to the employees and allow them to voice their concerns. This will be beneficial because employees will be given opportunity to make an impact on the company. This suggests the leaders should focus on the symbolic and political organizational frames. Employees will find it easier to accept what they've lost and highlight what they will gain in the near future. During the neutral zone, the standardization of lab protocols and processes must be implemented immediately to ensure the continuity of the lab quality management. New policies and procedures may need to be taught to the employees by their leaders. It is recommended that the leaders use the EDGE, explain, demonstrate, guide, and enable, and scaffolding techniques to facilitate these changes. Employees will feel less skeptical and less confused since instructions are clear. In this zone, it is important to have role models. These role models are leaders that must understand their goals and have likable traits. This will bring the team together. This will help employees to be more successful as they will mimic likable traits and be role models to others in the workplace. This suggests that leaders should focus on the structural, human resources, and political organizational frames. These recommendations will allow the employees to buy into change as they are more confident with the organization. Lastly, new beginnings is the phase when workers are excited and committed to the process. In this phase, it is important for employees to be reinforced. Leaders should take notice when a desired behavior is performed. Then a reward should be something that is added, verbal praise, or taken away, a monotonous task, to ensure future desired behaviors are performed. Additionally, purpose, consistent role models, and teaching skills should remain steady in this phase. This suggests that the leaders should focus on the human resources and symbolic frame. The BC Lab merger will be successful with the use of analyzing the issues with the Bridges model and recommendations that support the model.